Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the True Potential Do More With Your Money podcast. It is episode 64. It is the 16th of April. Just before we get going today, ladies and gentlemen, a quick request, please. Please click the like button on this video. And if you want to see more videos like this and the rest of the content, say like a daily motor markets video, please press the subscribe button as well. And that way you'll get informed every time we supply the latest update for you. So thanks for doing that in advance. And thank you to Jeff Casson, to Gregg and to David Harrison for joining me today as well. Today, gentlemen, we're going to be talking quite topical, really. We're talking about what the end of the latest UK lockdown means for investors. Obviously, across here in England, we're now allowed to sit in beer gardens. We're allowed to eat outside, allowed to get a haircut, allowed to go back to gyms. Jeff, up in Scotland, you've just had your schedule brought forward. I think you're now allowed to meet people outside.
Yeah, I'm allowed to meet outside for the first time in a long time.
First time in a long time.
I hear they're allowed to go around and lick each other in Scotland. That's what apparently that's a traditional greeting in Scotland, to lick each other.
Thankfully, I'm not Scottish, so I'll be able to remove myself from that tradition.
That's right. I'll just opt out of that one. So things are easing up, and hopefully, we've talked about optimism quite a bit over the last few weeks. But Jeff, I think we're stealing too many of your lines. It's looking optimistic in the markets as well right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and markets have continued to push on. This week, we look across the major equity markets. We've seen in Europe, Euro Stoxx 600 hit an all-time high. We've seen the S&P 500 in the US push on as well and hit an all-time high yesterday as well. So equity markets continue to move in a favourable direction, and it's also been driven by that reopening theme that we've touched on, and the cyclical recovery. We've seen a strong rebound in a lot of those sectors over the past number of weeks, and that trend has continued. And we look at some of the data that we had this week, and particularly yesterday from the US, it really gave evidence of that ongoing reopening of the economy. Really strong retail sales growth. Retail sales up 9.4%. For March, well ahead of anybody's expectations for that period. A combination of things. Yes, there's a bit of a base effect from a poor February, but also people wanting to go out. When you dig into the numbers, you can see that restaurants, pubs, things like that had very, very strong rebounds in March. So people wanting to spend the excess savings that they have, but also in the case of the US, the stimulus checks that we've discussed previously in these discussions. So the $1,400 that dropped into people's bank accounts hasn't been completely saved. A large part of it's been spent, and that's similar theme that we can see globally as economies reopen. Consumers are spending because savings levels are exceptionally high. As a percentage of disposable income, it's just increased over the past 12 months for the obvious reasons. But now we're starting to see it coming into the economy and be spent. I think the other sort of nuance to think about from an equity market perspective over the past week has just been the difference between developed markets and emerging markets. China was probably the weakest performing market over the course of the past week, and that's being driven by a sense there that, well, things happened earlier, so it's going to obviously, for the obvious reasons, start to slow a little bit. You'll see headlines this morning that talk about 18% GDP growth year on year, and yeah, that's a phenomenal number. But the thing is, it's kind of from a very low base effect. So if you look at the Chinese economy last year for the same quarter, it was minus 6%. So it's much better to look at the quarter and quarter improvement, and you can see that is moderating. For the obvious reasons, China was recovering earlier, so that's one of the reasons that we've seen China as an equity market lag. And then just some comments from the central bank there, the PBOC, in terms of the support and the withdrawal of that support to the market. I think the other thing that we as a team have been discussing a lot with our managers this week has been the inflation theme and how they're thinking about the inflation environment going forward. So very interesting from my perspective anyway to see how the bond market moved yesterday. Very strong economic data, but actually the bond market rallied. That's counterintuitive to what we have been seeing over the past couple of months indeed. So interesting for us to observe how the bond market digests some of that going forward. Commodity markets again speak to strength in economic activity. Iron ore prices continue to move higher. Look at the oil, gas as well. So all of those things that are going into the economy, the strength of economic recovery is very much evident. And then maybe just finally one thing to touch on, very, very topical, Bitcoin and Coinbase, the listing of Coinbase, which is a cryptocurrency exchange in the US, earlier in the week, achieved a valuation at one point of $100 billion with 56 million clients allegedly. But when you dig into it and you look at where the actual numbers are coming, it implies quite a big number of income from a relatively small number of clients. So to give some context for people, if we look at the London Stock Exchange, which we're all familiar with, it's got a valuation of some $58 billion. So really some of these newer areas of the market certainly garnering a lot of attention and very high values at this point in time.
Thanks, Jeff. And I think we'll maybe talk about the crypto side of things a little bit later today in terms of how people have been spending money over the last year as well, with kind of this pent-up savings which you mentioned. But you also mentioned, say, the London Stock Exchange there. And I think just looking across here, we challenged Mark Henderson last week to get the FTSE above 7,000. And he's succeeded. I'm just looking there on 7,016 as well there. So it's nice to see that territory reach that at last. Been long road back above 7,000. So well done to Mark Henderson for doing that single-handedly, rising to the challenge. So, gentlemen, we talked. I talked in the intro about the change in lockdown policy, and Jeff alluded to it there as well. So, kind of, if we just look at what the changes have been in England now, obviously retail's open again. You've got outdoor dining and drinks options. Gyms are open, hairdressers, beauty, etc. And also you can now stay overnight, say in a caravan, or as I did, a shepherd's hut the other night. We'll talk about that later. So some changes going on there. Gregg, looks like you've had your haircut. Is that an official haircut?
It is. I'll before David gets it in there, I'll go back to get it finished tomorrow. Don't worry too much about that. No, I did. I actually, it was weeks and weeks overdue, and I bit the bullet a couple of days ago, knowing I was coming on the podcast. So my hair started looking a bit like Lego. It was just one sort of round dome on top of my head. So I went to the barbers, and the guy actually joked, saying he was going to charge us double because it was that long and it was that, kind of much to get through. So finished the haircut, I got to the till, and he actually did charge double. So that's the joke. So instead of the £8.50, I paid 20 quid. So I even gave him
one bone every minute. One bone every minute.
I know. Well, but I was happy with the haircut. I must say it's been 6 months, I think, since it was last cut. So I was kind of pleased with the result anyway. So
did you have to wear a mask while it was going on?
It's optional for you getting your hair cut, but the barber has to wear a mask. They also had
I think that's all important, because under COVID, that will make a huge difference.
Yeah.
All of this will make a huge difference.
Yeah.
He didn't wear a mask anyway if he charged that price for that haircut.
I know.
I was going to say, you stole my joke.
Sorry.
It was in there somewhere, wasn't
You
it?
should have known, because the mask was down his eyes.
But the guy,
But it was just
the guy came out the back, and he looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, because he obviously had his mask on, but he also had the gown, he had all of the PPE kind of thing on, and you're kind of right, it must be uncomfortable for them, but when I sat in the chair, he said, "It's up to you. You can wear your mask or not," which I thought was quite good. But I did keep my mask on, which was quite uncomfortable with all the hairs getting in it. So if anyone,
not as uncomfortable as paying 20 quid.
I know.
Is he going to charge? Has he doubled the price for everybody, Greg?
I think it was just because of how long it took him to cut my hair. I think I took 2 appointments.
That's naughty. You know, it is. It's obviously it's quite natural for some places. David was talking in the intro about he was watching somebody on a barge who's doubled their prices for barge holidays this year. I think obviously this business has got to make the money back, but yeah, more than doubling the price of a haircut which takes 20 minutes seems a bit naughty. But I think obviously we're talking about the change of the lockdown policy and maybe the economic indicators, and going back to it's been alluded to in the press a lot of times, other than that we could see a type of spend which was seen after, say, the kind of after the First World War as well, and then after the Spanish flu side of things, which goes back 100 years now. So I don't know, David, I'll not make the obvious joke and say, do you remember what that was like?
Yeah,
I wouldn't
like it was yesterday.
Yeah, but I do know that you keenly study history. Actually, do you think there's parallels with that from 100 years ago?
I don't think so. There is no parallel at all. I think about 5 million people died in a short period of time. More people died in that than died, in the Great World War, and certainly more than in the Second World War. I know it's topical, but Prince Philip, who might be some people's, some people admire him, some people don't. I think younger people didn't quite get him. But that generation, I remember when my mother died, and I did say this, that kind of generation, you never heard anything from them. They didn't complain, they didn't weep and wail, they didn't, as you do now. I mean, I'm not, I hope I'm not Prince Philip, otherwise I wouldn't be able to speak. But I don't want to sound like him. I think that when people go on camera, as we are now, and they start and tell a story normally about themselves, and they begin to feel sorry for themselves, and they think, well, this is my chance. And then they go, sorry, I'm filling up. And I'm screaming at the telly and saying, oh, shut up, you soft so-and-so. I'm not actually even interested. I've got to watch the telly because something good. The last thing I want to see is somebody feeling sorry for themselves and weeping and wailing. But of course, you're supposed to be a hero. You're on the front line. All of that, to me, I have to say, Daniel, has been a really sad thing about this whole disease that we've had. For me, and I think the same with a lot of people I speak to now and whatever, we just can't see any logic in these rules. I see the logic with Scotland, right? Nicola, more than anything else, is trying to prove a point that she is a better operator than, say, the English government. Well, fine, Nicola, you might be. I hope you are, right? Because nobody in their right mind would hope for anybody in any part of the world to be ill. So whatever, but the sort of the same with Wales and Northern Ireland. We're all connected. Jeff's about 35 minutes away from me now, but he's in a different country. That's not going to stop the spread of anything. The ludicrousy of it. I think it's ludicrous getting charged 20 quid to get your haircut, by the way. But that's ludicrous. But to think you're being treated safely because a guy comes out and does that, who's touching touching hair and doing all of that. It's just going to be passed like wildfire if it does get passed like that. The fact is, Greg, there's not much chance of you getting it. And if you do get it, you're not going to be poorly, according to statistically, same with Daniel, same with Jeff. I might have had it worse. I don't know. I might have had it. But if I get, now these big tests and things like this, and Hancock's just made a mistake, hasn't he? I mean, he just ordered all these tests. He ordered all this IT stuff. Tests work, but what's the point? What is the point? Getting the test doesn't stop anything. It just tells you if you've got it. So what you say to people now is, I know everybody's out sunning themselves, running around that, but you just stay in the house for a week. And anybody you've talked to, stay in the house for a week. They're not going to do it. They're not frightened of it any longer. It's one of those things. It's not frightening to people. It's just acceptable, And of course, now what we're seeing, Daniel, unfortunately, I heard it on the news yesterday again. The head of the NHS comes on and says, well, we're going to have twice as much money for the next 5 years just to treat people who we haven't been treated, because every single doctor, every single person in the NHS has been fighting COVID. So nobody's been in. So, the most useless organisation in the world is the NHS, with some of the best people working in it. But, they run, lines, led by donkeys, I think was the saying from First World War, when troops were just told to just march. Don't run, but just march into machine gun fire. It's lines led by donkeys. And that's the NHS. Once again, I'm not Jeremy Clarkson. I think Clarkson can be funny, and he sometimes can't be funny. He's a bit boorish, a bit laddish, a bit the bore down the pub a little bit. But somebody sent me a little thing saying, have you read this? And it's this little article where he said, people are wondering why so many people have died in Britain and whatever. And he said, the answer is the NHS is the worst organisation in the world. Oh, and by the way, we're the most obese nation in Europe as well. So we've got a lot of fatties, which it seems to attack, because it's hard to get your breath. So if you're carrying weight around, I think that doesn't help. And we should just face up to that. Otherwise, we'll be searching and, having a look in the corner here, looking over there. I wonder why it's this. I wonder why it's that. And all of the money we're paying goes into that huge machine and it gets squandered. And adverts in the telly telling you to, do this, do that, do it. It'll cost millions of pounds. We know what we've got to do. You've told us. Or some people don't know. That's because they're stupid. You understand, in society, there's some very stupid people and some very bright people, and there are people like us who are somewhere in between. But stupid people are just stupid. You could print "stay safe" on their brows, and it wouldn't make any difference to them. They would catch a disease off that as well. There'd be something going on, and it'd feel, you victimise me, or now you victimise us because you've called us stupid. Well, no, that's the reality. The reality is you're stupid. Right? If you don't know to keep distance from somebody, if you don't know to wash your hands, if you don't know to wear a mask, and what's sad, Daniel, is we are on record. I'm glad to say it. We are on record saying a lot of this. That's February, March, April. I could never see any reason why people shouldn't wear masks. There's obviously things spray. As I'm talking now, but it's a spray going on this TV. I'm going to have to wash it down later on.
Jeff talked about a different outlook on things. Obviously, we've talked about the early easing of the published lockdown in Scotland at the moment. And are we thinking that's a political move, or is it a common sense move based on the data? That's a loaded question.
No, that's certainly a loaded question. I think
Careful, Jeff, they'll come round and burn your house later.
There's probably somebody listening into this as we're speaking anyway. Yeah. I think, it's certainly interesting timing in the sense of we've got local elections here in the coming weeks. So there's certainly a want to probably free things up a little bit ahead of that, because it probably looks quite good, and politically it's a positive. I think go back to something that David said. It's looking at the data, and I think from my perspective, where I am in the borders, looking at that and thinking about the case count here 2-3 per 100,000. That kind of tells you that it certainly would be the right thing to do to allow people to have much more freedom to be able to move about, to get businesses reopened. So if you take that sort of objective view at it, it's what's required. But I suppose at the end of the day, it ties back to maybe our earlier conversation there about people understanding statistics and the use of statistics. And yeah, statistics can be used in many ways to tell a bad picture, to tell a good picture. But at the end of the day, it's how people interpret it and analyze that information that's the most important bit of it. So giving people the ability to take a view needs to happen, or people's understanding of that data needs to really improve. I think that's the challenge. So maybe political, but I think data driven as well. But there certainly is an element of, wanting to show, if we go back even 6 to 8 weeks ago, the sort of the narrative here was very much we want to try and eradicate the virus. Well, that's nigh on an impossibility. So I think you have to put that to the side and think about, well, what is the level of that we can live with? How do we just get things back to normal and allow the economy to start to function again? So I think a combination of many factors, Daniel, together, but ultimately, the data would suggest things should be opening faster than they're opening. But that would be my take on it. I'm not a scientist, but the data certainly would suggest that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of scientists, Jeff and guys, there's a friend of mine called Matt Ridley, who Matt is an author as well as he's actually a Viscount, as well as sits in the House of Lords, whatever. But he's I would judge him to be a very bright person and a very good writer. And I picked up one of his older books, one of his original books called The Red Queen, and I'm going. It's hard reading to begin with. Now, I think he's learned as a journalist not to do what he just did in that book, which is to say you're going to find the beginning of the book very difficult to get through, and you think. So the tendency is to slip through to the back, isn't it? To go, well, I'll read this, but somewhere in a couple of things of note. One was he pointed out this in the 1890s, as had Nicholas Taleb in the early 2000s. The big thing that can cause a problem for the human race would be a virus. Okay. Bear in mind that, these things are more numerous than us. They've been around longer than us. A lot of these things, they, like us, mutate. But the difference is that we as humans might mutate, very slowly. Because they reproduce, at a huge speed, and there's lots of them, these mutations happen very quickly and happen all of the time. So the chances of eradicating any of this is nil, because it'll have been around for a long, long time. Just hasn't been maybe in us as a host. I'm now not. I freely admit I don't quite know what I'm talking about here. So this isn't reality. It's just bits and bobs that I've read and passing on here as if I'm an expert. I'm not, but I do know that we can't. I actually firmly believe, from everything I've ever read in my life so far, that if anything is going to wipe the human race out, it will be something that's living inside us now and living inside another animal. Okay, they're not there to look for. They're solely to look after themselves. It's a bit like our genes. Even our genes aren't there to help us. They're there to help themselves. They're there to continue on, to be born, to breed, ensure the young go in the right place, and that's it. And this a statistic which I'll get wrong here, but they're around about in your body about eight times more bacteria, and which I know isn't a virus, than have ever existed as humans since humans began. So just in your own body, there are more bacteria than any human, the total human race has ever totaled, 8 times more. So, the idea that you can eradicate or do all these things, it's just silly. And politicians, what has happened with this government, clearly, like Nicola, they have to get voted in. They're caught on in this paradox of if I don't get voted in, I can't make the changes which I know is good for the country. So whenever any good news comes along, I'll glorify it at the extreme. And I'll tell them what I think they want to hear, so I'll become popular. And, despite the pandemic and things which were only half popular, like Brexit was only half popular because just over half voted for it and just under half voted against it. Boris, we even call him Boris rather than the Tory government, Boris's popularity remains very high. And in fairness, what he's doing is he's standing up and speaking, and now some of it we may think doesn't make sense, and some of it has always been premature in some of this, which it's never worried me that, right? Because I do believe if you think something bad's going to happen, the only way you can be happy is for that bad thing to happen, because you see, you're right. Something bad's going to happen, believe you me. And you know what it's like when you're going anywhere, or you're doing anything, with even the mild bit of danger about it, or venture. The last thing you need is somebody muttering away like Keir Starmer, or worse still, Corbyn, going, "It's going to be terrible." And you just turn around and you just throw them out the car, wouldn't you, off a cliff or whatever, and just say, "Shut up." I've actually thunk about that, Tommy, right? I know it could be. I think I needed some weeping, wailing old woman telling me that. However, on the other thing, the last thing you need is some, public schoolboy going, "Hurrah," and jumping off a cliff and landing on you, and someone bounces up, and it's okay. I'm okay, So the two ends of that spectrum, I think, are quite horrible for us. So, I think Starmer's somewhere down there. He's a bit doubting down there. He's a lawyer after all, so he's taught to have a look at everything that could go wrong and put it onto a risk assessment sheet and frighten the client with it, and then really frighten them when you send them the bill. Whereas Boris will run into a brick wall and bounce off it. He won't run through it because he won't. He's human. But he'll eventually find a window and run to the window. And he'll always be trying to go forward. I think more than anything else, I mean, Boris wants to get back in, doesn't he? So I think for me, the spectrum between absolute and utter honesty with us all about this is it. He's a bit back from it as to this is what you want to hear. But at least it's in the right direction. At least it's not as political as we've seen with previous prime ministers, I think. I'm quite so. I'm hoping that, with the sun shining on him, we'll get out of this earlier. Hotels, other things. I mean, once again, there's no sense, rhyme, or reason in this myriad of rules and regulations now. So travel, Danny, I think was the thing you touched on before, whatever. Whether it be up a narrow boat up somewhere, I don't think you could find anywhere as boring as Norfolk in one of them boats. I mean, the horizon's about 3 inches higher than what you are, right? It's not even trees on the side; they're just like stunted bushes from. You used to have bushes like that on pit heaps at one point, and they put them on the Norfolk Broads. And what are you going to do? You're going to be going about 5 miles an hour. So you have to
as we were joking about before, that's obviously Alan Partridge's once paid to promote the Norfolk Broads.
Right. Don't go underneath the bridge in case a cow drops on you.
Yeah.
But given time, those people on those boats, right, will have to wear proper, they'll have rubber rings around them. They certainly have to have a helmet on them and maybe a mask. You know, that's where we're going with some of this rubbish, complete and utter rubbish. You know, life, just so people know, right? Life has never been better. People have never ever in the history of people been as well off as we are now, right? There are fewer murders, there are fewer rapes, there are fewer injuries to humankind than ever before, right? And when people say, boo-hoo, I don't have much food, or go to a food bank, have a proper look at the advert in the telly where you see children actually starving. That's what people who are short of food look like. We really do care about suffering and people being short of food and all the rest of it. There are lots of countries in the world which are nowhere near as well off as Great Britain, the 5th largest country in the world, with only 1% of the population of the world, right? You know, so the 5th largest economy in the world. I think we should, you know, Britain seems to, just to get back on the economic thing there, I think we're in a great spot right now. And, you know, I'd urge government to get rid of anybody in government who's thinking the wrong way. Thinking globally, you know.
It's certainly an interesting contrast in that when you think about just what's happening in terms of vaccination rollout, and you think about where the UK is and where the UK has got in that, by looking at it from I suppose a commercial perspective, in that, well, we're going to go out and we're going to see how many different types of vaccines we can get from different manufacturers, and we're going to just roll that out, because as long as the efficacy is strong and good, it'll be a positive. To your point, David, contrast that with Europe, but then I think even more so contrast that with the difficult situation that a lot of emerging markets find themselves in, because they can't get access to the vaccine. And you can see that playing through slightly differently. So if we look at what's happening in the likes of Brazil or India at this point in time, they're having a really difficult time in trying to deal with second or third wave of COVID, because they can't get access to the same number of vaccinations, or we think about just that rollout plan. So there is real differences, and they will make economic differences. But then at the other side of that, we've got the view of where the US is in terms of nearly getting close to herd immunity in the next couple of months. The UK will be very similar. That will just take a period of time to roll through these other areas, which in the end may support an even longer economic recovery that we may see. So it's a double-edged sword, isn't it, that we can't get enough of the vaccine to everybody that requires it, because everybody needs it, but it may be a positive in the medium to longer term for economic activity.
I suspect what we'll see, Jeff, is that as the year goes on, and maybe into next year, and the statistics begin to settle, you may see that Great Britain did worse than, say, Australia. Well, Australia is a very different country. You know, it's a huge place. There's a lot of space between every person there. A much younger population. It's, you know, it might be a meeting place for the Pacific. It's not really. You know, that would be more your Hong Kongs and Shanghais and Singapore. And I don't know, maybe I'm guessing 60 to 70% of their exports are things such as coal, iron ore, you know, those sort of things. So their economy is based very much on those kind of industries. And of course, they've got a vibrant internal economy. But you don't, like, I think I'll fly to Australia on my way to anywhere. You know, it's a destination. London, Heathrow, and Britain. I mean, we position ourselves as being a crossroads. So there's always more difficulty trying to shut something out. But I think we'll end up not looking too bad. And, yes, you will have some very angry people if somebody was stupid enough to say your mum and dad was going to die and your granny was going to die in any case. But statistically, it was always going to be very difficult to stop those people dying. On average, I heard it on the TV, so it must be true. You're in a care home for just over a year. You don't come to the care home, think, I'll go in the care home. That's grand. Now I'm going out. I'm going somewhere else now. You just don't get out. You go out in a box. So it's premature by, for somebody dying at 50 is a premature. They're dying maybe 30 years before you'd expect. There's somebody who's 83, they're dying 1 year before you would expect them to die. Maybe, it's different for every person, but that's happened here because we did get caught. I think we did get caught with it. It was unfortunate. There was a few weeks there where we spun around, and I don't think government, in fairness, government should admit this, and I think in fairness they're trying to, but they didn't realise how serious this was for old people, and for obese people as well. Boris is fat. I wouldn't say he's obese, but he's certainly always been plump. And look, he got it very badly. But anybody that looked like Boris got it badly. This is just the reality. Some people who are fit as fleas died, and will do. But I think, Jeff, I think you're right. That statistically, you can't stop this virus if it's out in the wild. The only way to stop it is to stay in the house out of the way, which has huge problems as well because of social animals. So I think statistically it'll be the same for everybody in the end.
Yeah. And I think going back to the Australia or indeed even the New Zealand example, it gets a bit tiresome when I read about how well they've done. Like, oh, look how great New Zealand or Australia done. Well, they've applied a completely different approach, which is they've just completely closed down, and that's had big social consequences. I've got family across in Australia, and my brother-in-law's brother died last year, and family couldn't get across to Australia for his birthday, for his funeral. So you're missing out on these huge things because you have to get special permission to get into Australia. You've got to wait in the queue, then you've got to spend 2 weeks in a lockdown. So yes, you've contained the vaccination, but maybe at what cost? Yes, deaths are down, but you've missed out on a whole year plus now of that human interaction. But also now you're seeing coming out of this, go back to Jeff's point, the virus still hasn't gone anywhere, but now what you've got is an Australian population very resistant to getting vaccinated because they haven't had to go through what we have. So the Australians missed their vaccination target by 80% recently. A couple
and they
of
will
weeks
get
ago.
it. They will get it. It will go through
unless
them.
Unless they're going to remain like in this stasis forever. It's going to come. So I think it's tiresome when I read about look how much better New Zealand or Australia have done than other countries out there.
So I do think we'll win through. Jeff's, let's be quite clear on this. Okay, what saved us is the vaccine. Most people would agree. We can't sit in the house forever. Seems to be no other way out of this. The government need to remember what they said was, you've got a shield until we find a vaccine. We found a vaccine. So keep making it up. Stop listening to the public health Johnnies that got you into trouble and continue to get into trouble. Just listen to the population, right? Just letting people free now is not going to make much difference. Of course, we'll get a surge, but the same as the figures that Jeff was giving earlier, from a low to just a little bit higher than a low, percentage-wise seems like a surge, but it's not. You know, it's livable. It's you can deal with it. But I think that as we go forward, what we have to do is make the most of this.
Yeah,
I think the statistics will show that there is the only thing you have to remember: what caused us to get it, nobody knows. What solved it was actually private sector. Private sector drug companies, right, see an opportunity to do good, see an opportunity and should make a profit, right? Because without a profit, they can't be there to do it again and again and again. So, you know, as wide a choice as possible, competing to find a virus that works, has worked, and private sector has saved us. Public sector has helped us cope, but hasn't saved us. Private sector has saved us. Private, public, and armed services helped us roll it out. I mean, you know, it's fantastic. But the thing is, people are turning up. People are knocking on the door to get it.
Yeah.
You're not having to convince them, right? So this is not something. The demand is almost outpacing the supply. So why people would be put off with it, where we've hardly any deaths, and of course what we're now seeing is the chances of having some of those blood clots are just as high if you don't have the vaccine, or if you're vaccinated. It would appear that it could be just neutral. You know,
I've got a couple of friends who are, you know, chemists, so they spent their life doing and training, and they're quite irate about this whole blood clot thing, because they're like, do you know what gives you more blood clots is taking a contraceptive pill, which millions of females take every single day without thinking about it. Do you know what else gives you more blood clots? Yeah. Do you know what else gives you more blood clots? Flying, you know, long haul flights. All these things are at higher risk than a vaccine.
But again, that goes back to, I suppose, the thought process and the understanding of that, because the headline is the sensational aspect. Whereas if you look at the J&J vaccination that's been suspended in the US this week for 6 blood clots out of 6.8 to 7 million doses administered, you know, the statistical, it's an error rate. It's not even a statistically significant number, and I think that's the thing that, you know, is a little bit frustrating. And also we know that, you know, as you're saying there, David, there will be a pickup, but no doubt the media will portray that as a significant percentage change without giving it as a percentage of the population. And, you know, it's these things that I think, you know, as society, we probably need to think about. How do we get people to understand stats better? How do we get people to look at the numbers and interpret them and take a view, as opposed to, you know, media sensationalism driving the narrative when it's not required? I don't know what the answer to that is, but it's certainly something is needed to get people to look at data in objective manners. Yeah,
I think, Jeff, I mean, one of the things that we're trying to do at Beacon of Light is a school that we sponsor, if you like. It's just to get kids to concentrate on real world, real life skills, such as reading, you know, and writing, which it sounds so simple, but it is so important to be able to read, to be able to write, and then be able to talk and convey the things. It's such a basic human thing. I mean, dogs don't do it. You know, the next most, you know, apes don't do it. We hear all this. We're not far away from apes. You're joking. You know, we're hundreds of millions of light years away from the nearest animal that could be, you know, considered to be as clever as a human. You know, I mean, apes aren't planning right now to sit down and send something around Mars. You know, and they're just not. Right? They're thinking about, I think I'll go and have a leaf to eat, and I think I'll you know, I'll mate with that very, very nice looking girl ape over there. That's it. End of it. You know, every now and then one picks up a stone. You go, look at that, that's clever. It's not. It's just an ape picking up a stone. Humans are clever, and so we teach them that and basic maths and stuff like this, which somehow the school misses, because for generations now we've had people concentrating on the wrong thing. You know, how do you? I mean, it's like anything else, isn't it? How can we turn out more cars out of a factory? How can we turn out more pupils from schools? Well, you know, at first, you know, you're working 8-hour shifts, but then the demand is greater, so I'll work overtime. You know, I'll train people, I'll pay them well, I'll get them to work overtime, and then you get them to work shifts. I've got some grandchildren who begin to board. I'm not telling you boarding school, but their school day starts at 7:45. Well, the teaching. Before then, they're up and they're getting breakfast and stuff like this. And the lessons start. The lessons finish at 2:00. They have 3 hours of physical activity, sport, other things. Okay. And then they do some more. They go and get something to eat. Then they do some more study. And they can get an hour with an electronic device. That's it. Off to sleep, you know, up again. And okay, they have long breaks and so on and so forth, right? But they're still doing, you know, huge percentages more hours getting taught than the average kid going to a state school right now, where by the time we get to there 9 o'clock, clot about do this, that, and the other. I don't know, probably give them a health assessment, risk assessment, all sorts of things, you know. I don't know what you do. You know, you've got teachers' assistants. You've got, in this school, by the way, they don't have teachers' assistants. You just have teachers. Right? You don't need administrators. What are you administering? They're just children, man. You know, all of this, I'm doing my lesson plans. Why? You know, why? 2 and 2 equals 4. And it did when I was a kid. You don't need to do a lesson plan for any maths, anything like that. You want to make it interesting? Fine. Teach them it while you stand on your head. Right? But it's not a teacher's training day. Why? They've been off for 6 weeks. Bring them in a week earlier and get them to train if you think they're training them. No. They're training them to drink red wine somewhere. And that's been maybe hard on some teachers, but not on a big majority of them. Right? They've had an opportunity during this time to teach kids and whatever, and they've sat in the house and they've been looking after the heroes' children. Fine. Well, they could have been looking after everybody's children, then, can't they? You know, if some kids can go to school, all kids can go to school. You know, it only takes one virus. It doesn't even take one person to spread. So the whole thing, and I know if you're 2 meters away, it won't go that far or whatever. It will, okay? It does, but it doesn't harm children. And you could inoculate teachers if you wanted to now for a long time. So yeah, I think, Jeff, I mean, I do think you're right that if you were to get people to deal with reality, if the general population were just a little bit more, you know, that's why I like Open University. They'll take people in at stages in life where they're ready to learn. Maybe some of us weren't ready to learn when we were teenagers. It was just too full of nonsense, you know, so what? You can catch up later if you want to. That's where Open University and other things come into there. I think that, you know, so I do believe that education is a big part to play, but the way it stands right now, you know, we've got a population that's relying on, I mean, if you've got a president of the United States using social media, you know, you don't want people to necessarily have to be brain boxes or whatever, but I would urge people just to try and get some facts. Try and form your opinion after you get the facts. People in True potential, no. I'm awful like that. I'll just say I'm not interested. I'm not an accountant, but I do want the figures first. Give me the figures first, and then dance around and explain why you've been dismal. But don't dance around first, because when the figures come out, it'll be awful for you. Just give us, because you should form an opinion once you've had the figures. Yeah. Don't form an opinion. That's what salesmen do to you. First things first, first impressions count, all that kind of stuff. Try and get the figures, try and get the stats. Same with money. We've got people listening in who've got money with us. That's what we do. We look at the facts. We are searching for reality, and we're diversifying your money, because we know that's not a theory. We know that has worked well for a long, long time. And we know stock markets have worked for hundreds of years. Better than property, better than cash, better than other things. Of course, you now know things can go down as well as up. And things have gone down dramatically. I don't think there's been a year, Jeff, a year and a half, really. I sound like one. I was going to use unprecedented. Can we get them all out? Unprecedented, strange times, special times, all these kind of things. But we now must be just like an average, ordinary time. We're coming out of those unprecedented times with the ordinary times. But we've had some of the biggest drops that I've seen on the stock market, and yet I'm actually better off.
I think that's it. We've seen some of the swiftest drops, and that's probably the change that was very evident in terms of what happened last year from around the 18th of February then through to the 23rd of March, and that speed of the drop, and then the speed of the subsequent recovery that we've seen. And that's been the one point that has been, certainly in the time that I've been looking at markets, the very different aspect of this situation that we've been in. But then again, it was a man-made situation. We unilaterally, our governments took the decision to close down economies and then to reopen them, which was not what has typically caused the volatility that would have seen 2007, 2008 in markets back to the late 90s, early 2000s. Those weren't the issues that were causing the challenge in markets. So it's the environment for asset markets was different through that period, but people haven't been able to spend. So if you look at the UK and you think about where household savings rate, last year it peaked out at 25-26% of disposable income, and it's come down a bit, but it's still at mid-teens. It typically runs sort of 5 to 7%. So that wealth effect, for the vast majority of people, they are better off in this environment that we've had to live through, because for one, in the UK we've been unable to spend, but then if we look at it in other countries where you've still got similar very high savings levels, it's been because of government handouts, which time will tell whether they were actually required or not. Did a large swathe of the US population require checks for $1,400 last month, when we've got an economy that seems to be recovering of its own accord, and if not, if anything, sort of strengthening? If we added grist to the mill when it's not really needed.
Interesting. I think we'll probably wrap it up there. I think based on that kind of question Jeff's asking, but also based on David's points as well about searching for the facts as well. I think they're two really interesting points to finish today on. So Gregg, Jeff and David, thank you so much for all of your input today and bringing some new ideas, I think, into the conversation. And ladies and gentlemen as well, thank you very much for listening. As I mentioned at the start, please do like and please do subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our future updates. Next week, I think it's either Q&A or the investment management session as well. So more facts to come and more help to give all of you. So please watch out for that. Have a lovely weekend, everybody. Enjoy the new freedoms and speak to you all very soon. Cheers for now. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Subscribing to True Potential YouTube channel is quick and easy. Simply go to your YouTube app on your phone, type in True Potential and press the red subscribe option. You'll then be notified as and when new videos are released.